Okay, Roland, I know in your most of your day is spent helping people who don't eat really well. And a really significant subset of that is athletes.
Yes, they are, despite all their shortcomings with health, they're still incredibly gifted athletes from a genetic perspective, but there's a lot of room left on the table for improvement.
So their diets, let's just talk these Mr. Olympians, right? Their diets are very targeted to make sure that their skin is thin, their veins are sticking out, every fiber in their muscle is designed to be shown, and their diets are really, really, really restrictive to get there.
I mean, it's basically protein and carbs, chicken and rice, beef and rice, chicken and potato. That pattern, it's probably the same few foods in a vacuum every day for years. So there's no diversity among the rotation of foods.
Right, and so there's very little diversity in their microbiome.
Very much so.
So what do you do to help them? Obviously, there are probably times when you can help, and other times they have to stay on this restrictive diet to meet peak performance at the optimal time. But then there's a period of time in between competitions where you can work on them?
Well, yeah, even when it comes down to optimizing performance, one thing that you can do is you can look at food biochemically rather than align with a modality, keto, paleo, what have you, because when you strip away the name, you look at what the diet is constructed of, what the constituents are, and what kind of internal response the body's going to get by focusing on or eliminating other foods. So the problem with a lot of pro athletes is they need to become as anabolic as possible, as often as possible, because muscle mass is the name of the game, right? Recovery is the name of the game. You need protein, but you also need a lot of carbs to supply the intensive energy demands of their sports. The issue becomes with the quantity they eat, the frequency they eat, and the lack of diversity they eat, their GI systems slowly become problematic for them because, as we discussed before, when you don't give your digestive system the support it needs, you just work it all the time without giving it a vacation, it slowly starts to shut down. In conjunction with that, you have undigested proteins, you have excessive amounts of simple sugars reaching the bowel. And when that happens, you start to promote dysbiosis and other kind of digestive issues that will manifest themselves at some point. Add into that the stresses of training, the stresses of travel, irregular sleep patterns, and these guys, while looking very impressive on the outside, while looking very impressive in their disciplines, on the inside they're biochemical disasters. So the biggest thing I do with them when it comes to food and integrative health support is I try to look at all the pieces of the puzzle that aren't working optimally, and I ask myself, where can I plug something in to put a break in the system where there's a disruption or a dysfunction? And oftentimes that comes from reverse engineering the amount of protein, carbohydrates, and other foods they're eating, and asking, well, if we know what our macronutrients are, how can I get these from different sources and better sources that give me variety? If I know that a white potato has a certain amount of carbohydrate, and a sweet potato can match that, but it also has beta carotene, zinc, magnesium, then not only am I addressing my macronutrients, I'm doing something for the micronutrients, which no one thinks about how much magnesium they get, or how much phosphorus, or how much zinc. And because of the stresses that are placed upon their bodies consuming 4,000 to 7,000 calories a day, well, what does that do to their stomach?
Yeah.
Or their pancreas, or their brush border for that fact? Things are not moving through the system properly, so you have alterations in transit time, the potential consequences of toxic overload if things are moving on a regular basis, or if they're moving too quickly because certain microbes affect the thing that moves food through our system, the peristalsis of the migrating order complex. Things might be moving through too quickly, so the 200 grams of protein you maybe think you're eating is not being digested, absorbed, and eliminated. Back to that whole point. So with athletes, the overarching philosophy that I've now really been constructing and refining is to be healthy is foundational to perform at a high level. You can be healthy and not be an athlete, but you can be an athlete who is unhealthy. So you have to establish a baseline of health if you want to maximize the ability of your body's performance and recovery capacities. And the analogy I'll use is a race car has a mechanic, it has a crew chief, it has a lead engineer, it has a team boss, if you will, and they're poring over all the data and telemetry to figure out how they can get a tenth of a second here, 100th of a second there, and that may be the difference between first place and fifth place. But after that car is done performing, you change the oil, you rotate the tires, you change the brake pads, all the fluids. So its maintenance is really what allows that car to perform at an elite level. Your car does not get better the harder you drive it, but that's the mentality that we use with our body by training harder, not training smarter, eating more, not eating ideally or optimally. And things will break down over time because the average athlete lives in this world of being anabolic, suboptimal recovery, inflamed, perpetually trying to recover without ever allowing their physiology and their nervous systems to adapt to a new baseline, which ultimately allows them to maintain that peak and thus potentially extend their career and take their performance to a new level.
Yeah, and it's funny, in a odd sort of way funny. Troy Opperley, who created US Enzymes, is an extreme athlete.
Extreme endurance athlete.
Yeah. He has climbed the highest mountain on every continent. He won the race through the Grand Canyon. That's putting a 40-pound pack on your back and going over and in and out, rim to rim. He's that kind of an athlete. And when he climbed Mount Everest, he took Protein-Zyme, which is a plant-based protein that has some probiotic organisms in it and some enzymes. He took a digestive enzyme. He took Therazyme, and he took a probiotic. And when he climbed Mount Everest, his weight loss was maybe 10 to 14 pounds. Other people, when they climb Mount Everest, it can go up as high as 40 pounds of weight loss. So he could recover and replenish by taking that in the morning and that at night when he climbed Mount Everest, or when he won his other races. So when he trains, that's what he focuses on. And the Therazyme, especially with mountain climbing, keeps your blood a little bit thinner. You can take in more oxygen when you're in an oxygen-deprived area. But he had the protein, he took the enzymes to break it down because you're under stress. You're at 13,000 feet, you're under stress. Just go to Alta, Utah and try to run when you've been running here in Pennsylvania at 1,200 feet, and you'll see the difference. So, these are products that have been used by athletes, been created and designed by athletes. So I think that it's a pretty interesting category to start looking at for even as high school athletes. The weekend warrior who goes out and overtaxes them. I mean, Eric, for instance.
Anyone who wants to utilize their body for performance, I always say when it's about trophies or numbers on a clock or weight on a bar, it's not necessarily about health. And we make the assumption that sports will get you healthy. You need to prepare the body for being able to basically perform at a high level. And if you're not looking at all the arms of influence or all the areas of potential adaptability that you can support the health, the performance in isolation, and most importantly, the recovery, well, then you're again potentially subjecting your body to something that it may not have the tolerance, bandwidth, or stress recovery abilities to adapt to.
And we'll just talk about Eric Pankewich again. He's not 22 anymore, and he was training for triathlons, and overtaxing his body, and he ended up with insulin issues and Hashimoto's. And he's not a weekend warrior, but he was trying to function like he did when he was 20, and still have a job and still do all the things he does as a chiropractor. And he ended up with these disabilities, if you will, because he was overtaxing his body.
And stress pushes the body out of balance, and people don't realize that too much of a good thing is simply too much. Exercise is one of those things where you're asking your energy production systems, your connective tissue, your skeletal systems, your muscular systems, all to do something that is outside the bounds of normal function. And for an average person, how far you stray from normal function is how much direct stress you're putting your physiology under. And to prepare for that on the preparation end is to get your body in good, healthy working order first and foremost. Knowing where your tolerances are during the competition or the activity, that's a matter of subjective interpretation. But after the fact, making sure that your immune system can help remodel bone mass and damaged connective tissue make sure that your cardiovascular system and your blood is flowing properly to allow oxygen to be properly delivered to tissues. Same thing with nutrients. Even your lymphatic system has a very important role in delivering fatty acids for energy metabolization purposes. So utilizing digestive support, probiotics, prebiotics, systemic enzymes in conjunction with obviously lifestyle, diet, and appropriate exercise really is the holistic path to health and performance that's sustainable. Not something that's quick before an injury, then never to be done again. That's not what we want to promote.
Right.